The scar that ran from Sarah Zimmerman's temple to her jaw was the first thing people noticed and the last thing they forgot. She had learned to read faces in the split second before pity or revulsion settled in. And on this sweltering August day in 1877, as she stepped off the dusty stagecoach in San Jose, California, she saw that familiar flicker cross the station attendant's weathered features before he quickly looked away. "Need help with your trunk, miss?" he asked, addressing the dirt at his feet rather than her face. "I can manage," Sarah replied quietly, reaching for the worn leather case that contained everything she owned. At 22 years old, she had grown accustomed to managing on her own. The accident had happened when she was 14. A kerosene lamp knocked over during a winter storm back in Missouri. Her mother had pulled her from the flames, but not before the fire had painted its permanent mark across the right side of her face. The physical pain had eventually subsided, but her mother's words, spoken in the dark hours of that first terrible night, had burrowed deep into Sarah's chest and made a home there. "No man will ever love you now," her mother had whispered, and Sarah knew it was not meant as cruelty but as fact, the way one might observe that winter follows autumn. "You will have to make your own way in this world," so Sarah had learned to be useful. She had studied teaching from borrowed books, practiced her letters until they were perfect, and when she saw the advertisement seeking a schoolteacher for San Jose's growing community, she had applied with the kind of desperate hope that comes from having no other options. The position was hers, the letter said, if she could arrive by September 1st. She had exactly 2 weeks to prepare. San Jose in late summer was a world away from the humid green of Missouri. The air was dry and warm, carrying the scent of fruit orchards and dust. The town sprawled along the base of rolling golden hills, its main street, a mixture of adobe buildings left from the Spanish days and newer wooden structures that spoke of American ambition. Sarah walked slowly, her trunk growing heavier with each step, studying the town that would be her home. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple whitewashed building with a bell tower that caught the afternoon sun. Next to it stood a small cottage, barely more than 4 rooms, but it would be hers. The key had been left with the general store owner. The letter had said, "A Mr. Patterson who could be relied upon for anything she might need." Patterson's Mercantile occupied a prime corner of Main Street, its wide windows displaying everything from farm implements to bolts of fabric. Sarah pushed open the door, grateful for the shade inside, and heard the small bell above announce her arrival. "Be right with you," called a voice from the back, followed by the sound of boots on wooden floorboards. The man who emerged was in his 50s, with kind eyes and a generous mustache. "What can I do for you, miss? I am Sarah Zimmerman, the new schoolteacher. I was told you might have the key to the cottage, Miss Zimmerman, of course, of course." Mr. Patterson's gaze took in her face without flinching, and she felt something tight in her chest ease slightly. "We have been expecting you. Let me just find that key. My son can help you with your trunk." Fletcher. The young man who appeared from the storeroom was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that fell across his forehead. He wore the practical clothes of a working man, denim pants, a worn cotton shirt, and a leather vest. But it was his face that caught Sarah's attention, the strong lines of jaw and cheekbone, and eyes the color of whiskey in firelight. He looked to be about her age, perhaps a year or 2 older. "Fletcher, this is Miss Zimmerman, our new teacher. Help her get settled in the cottage, would you?" Fletcher Turner had been reaching for a crate of canned goods when his father called, and he turned with the automatic response of someone accustomed to being helpful. The young woman standing at the counter was small-boned and delicate, with honey-colored hair pulled back in a practical bun. When she turned fully toward him, he saw the scar that twisted across the right side of her face, a shiny ridge of skin that spoke of old pain and survival. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The thought came unbidden and absolute, settling into his bones with the certainty of sunrise. There was something in the set of her shoulders, the quiet dignity in her posture, the intelligence in her gray eyes that looked at him steadily, waiting for the usual reaction. "It would be my pleasure, Miss Zimmerman," Fletcher said, and meant it with his whole heart. "Let me take that trunk for you. I can carry it," she said automatically, but he was already lifting it, finding it lighter than he expected. "I am sure you can," he replied easily, "but my mother would have my hide if I let a lady carry her own trunk through town in this heat." "I value my hide considerably." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile but something close. "Well, if it is a matter of preserving your hide." They walked through San Jose's dusty streets in a silence that felt less awkward than Sarah had anticipated. Fletcher matched his longer stride to hers, pointing out landmarks as they went. The church with its small cemetery. The saloon that was quiet during the day but lively at night. The livery stable run by old Miguel, who could fix any wagon and shoe any horse. The boarding house where most of the single men took their meals. "Do you live in town?" Sarah asked, then wondered if the question was too personal. "On a ranch about 5 miles out," Fletcher replied. "The Twisted Creek Ranch. My father owns the store, but I work for Daniel Carlisle, raising horses and cattle. I come into town a few times a week for supplies and to help at the store when needed." He paused, then added, "The ranch is beautiful this time of year. Golden hills as far as you can see, live oaks in the valleys, and a creek that stays cool even in August." There was something in his voice when he spoke of the land, a reverence that Sarah recognized. She had felt it herself for books, for learning, for the precise moment when a student's face lit with understanding. The cottage was small but clean, with a narrow front porch and windows that looked out toward the schoolhouse. Fletcher set her trunk down in the main room, which served as both parlor and kitchen, with a cast-iron stove in one corner and a simple table with 2 chairs. 2 other doors led to a small bedroom and what Sarah hoped was a storage room. "The town provides firewood in winter," Fletcher said, "and Mr. Patterson will extend you credit at the store until you receive your first payment. There is a pump out back for water, and the outhouse is behind the schoolhouse, shared but usually clean." "Thank you," Sarah said, suddenly aware of how alone she was with this man, how small the cottage seemed with his presence filling it. "I appreciate your help." Fletcher should have left then. There was work waiting at the ranch, supplies to load, a dozen tasks that needed doing before sunset. Instead, he found himself lingering, hat in his hands, searching for a reason to stay. "School starts in 2 weeks," he asked, though he already knew the answer. "September 1st, Sarah confirmed. "I will need to inventory the supplies and prepare lesson plans." "I understand there are children of various ages, about 20 students, ranging from 6 to 15, Fletcher said. "Some of the older boys only come in winter when the ranch work slows down. The families around here value education, though. You will find them supportive." Sarah moved to the window, looking out at the schoolhouse that would be her domain, her purpose, her reason for being in this place. "I hope to prove worthy of their trust. I am sure you will." Fletcher spoke with a certainty that made her turn to look at him. "It takes courage to come all this way alone, to take on the responsibility of teaching a town's children. That kind of courage speaks to character." Something in his tone, in the way he looked directly at her without his gaze sliding away from her scar, made Sarah's throat tight. "You are kind to say so. I am not being kind, I am being truthful." Fletcher settled his hat back on his head, knowing he had already stayed longer than propriety allowed. "If you need anything, Miss Zimmerman, anything at all, you need only ask. My father's store, or if you see me around town, I am always happy to help." After he left, Sarah stood in the quiet cottage and pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart beat too fast beneath her palm. She told herself it was simply the stress of travel, the anxiety of starting a new life in a strange place. She told herself Fletcher Turner's kindness meant nothing more than Western hospitality, the code of behavior that governed interactions in frontier towns. But when she closed her eyes, she could still see the way he had looked at her, steady and direct, as if the scar that dominated her face was simply a part of her geography, no more notable than the color of her hair or the shape of her hands. That night, lying in the narrow bed in her new home, Sarah allowed herself a dangerous thought. What if her mother had been wrong? The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah scrubbed the schoolhouse from floor to ceiling, organized the donated books into some semblance of a library, and inventoried supplies of slate boards, chalk, and precious paper. She wrote lesson plans for multiple age groups, designed a system for tracking attendance and progress, and tried to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach that grew stronger as September 1st approached. Fletcher Turner appeared with startling regularity, always with some plausible reason. He brought lumber to repair a loose floorboard in the schoolhouse. He delivered a crate of apples from his ranch, saying they had more than they could use and students needed good food for learning. He showed up with a wagon full of firewood, claiming he had cut extra and it would only go to waste. Each time he stayed to help with whatever task Sarah was tackling. He rehung the schoolhouse door that had been sticking. He built new shelves for the books. He climbed on the roof to ensure it would hold against winter rains still months away, and each time he talked. Not empty chatter, but real conversation. He asked about her teaching philosophy and listened thoughtfully to her answers. He told her about the children she would be teaching, giving her insights into their personalities and home situations that would prove invaluable. He spoke about his work on the ranch, about breaking horses and managing cattle, about the satisfaction of good honest labor under an open sky. Sarah found herself waiting for his visits, listening for the sound of his wagon, watching the road from her cottage window with an anticipation she tried to deny. "You are making a fool of yourself," she whispered to her reflection as she changed into a clean dress on a Thursday afternoon, telling herself it had nothing to do with the fact that Fletcher usually came to town on Thursdays. He is being neighborly, nothing more. But when he arrived an hour later with a beautiful desk lamp for her cottage, saying he had found it in the store's inventory and thought she could use it for preparing lessons, she could not quite convince herself that neighbors bought gifts for each other. "Fletcher, I cannot accept this," she protested, even as her fingers traced the smooth brass base, the delicate glass shade painted with tiny flowers. "It is too much." "It was just gathering dust in the storeroom," he said, which she suspected was a lie. "My father agreed you should have it." A teacher needs good light for all that planning and paper grading. They were standing close in the small cottage, and Sarah could smell the clean scent of him, soap and sun and something else, something that was uniquely Fletcher. When she looked up to thank him, she found him already watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, naked and vulnerable. Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah braced herself for the polite deflection, the assurance that he would do the same for anyone, that it meant nothing special. Instead, he said, "Because I want to know you. Because every time I ride back to the ranch, I spend the whole way thinking about what I will talk to you about next time. Because you are the most interesting person I have ever met, and I am hoping that if I make myself useful enough, you will let me keep coming around." Sarah's hand flew to her scarred cheek, an automatic gesture of self-consciousness. "Fletcher, you do not have to do not," he said quietly but firmly. "Assume you know what I have to do. I am here because I want to be. I keep coming back because I cannot seem to stay away." He took a careful step closer, giving her space to retreat if she wished. "I know we have only known each other 2 weeks. I know this is fast, but I have never been good at pretending, Sarah. May I call you Sarah?" She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Sarah," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. "I would like your permission to court you, properly, with all the respect and propriety that entails. I would like to take you on drives, bring you flowers, sit with you on Sunday evenings, and let this town know that you have someone who cares for you." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Why me?" Fletcher reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, and gently took her hand that was still pressed against her scarred cheek. He drew it away, holding it carefully in both of his. "Because you are brave and intelligent and kind. Because you came all this way to teach children you have never met. Because when you talk about books and learning, your whole face lights up. Because you have survived something terrible and let it make you stronger instead of bitter." He paused, then added with devastating simplicity, "Because when I look at you, I see someone I could spend my whole life getting to know and never be bored." Tears burned in Sarah's eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She had taught herself not to cry years ago after her mother's pronouncement, after she realized tears changed nothing. My mother said no man would ever love me. She said the scar made me unlovable. The flash of anger that crossed Fletcher's face was quick but fierce. Then your mother was wrong. Dead wrong. And if you give me the chance, Sarah Zimmerman, I will prove it to you. Not just once, but every single day for as long as you will let me. The words hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying and wonderful. Sarah looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had been afraid to speak, and made a choice. Yes, she said. Yes, you may court me. The smile that broke across Fletcher's face was like sunrise, warm and brilliant and impossible to look away from. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so courtly and old-fashioned that it made her heart ache. Thank you. You will not regret it, I promise. After he left, Sarah sat at her new table with her new lamp and tried to process what had just happened. Fletcher Turner wanted to court her. A man who could have any woman he wanted, who was handsome and kind and good, had asked permission to win her heart. The scared part of her, the part that had absorbed her mother's words like poison, whispered that this could not be real, that he would change his mind, that he would wake up and see her the way everyone else did. But a newer, braver part of her remembered the way he had looked at her, the certainty in his voice, the careful reverence with which he had held her hand. And that part wondered if maybe, just maybe, her mother had been catastrophically wrong. The first day of school arrived with September sunshine and Sarah's stomach in knots. She stood at the schoolhouse door in her best dress, watching families arrive with their children. The students ranged from tiny 6-year-olds clinging to their mother's skirts to nearly grown teenagers who towered over her. She greeted each one, learning names and making mental notes. Thomas Carlyle, 14, son of the ranch owner Fletcher worked for. Mary O'Brien, 8, with bright red braids and a gap-toothed smile. The Martinez twins, 11, finishing each other's sentences. Young William Patterson, 6, Fletcher's cousin, who looked terrified until Sarah knelt down and told him she was a little scared too, and maybe they could be brave together. By mid-morning, Sarah had fallen in love with all of them. The little ones who struggled with their letters but tried so hard. The middle children who soaked up knowledge like desert sand absorbing rain. The older students who challenged her, who asked difficult questions and made her think. She was helping William sound out words in his primer when a shadow fell across the doorway. Fletcher stood there with his hat in his hands, and every child in the room turned to look. Mr. Turner. Several of them called out, clearly familiar with him. I apologize for interrupting, Miss Zimmerman, Fletcher said, painfully formal. My father wanted me to drop off the additional supplies you requested. Of course, Sarah replied, equally proper, aware of 20 pairs of eyes watching their interaction with great interest. Children, continue your work, please. William, sound out the next line for me. She stepped outside where Fletcher was unloading boxes from his wagon. Paper, chalk, ink, and a beautiful globe that must have cost a fortune. Fletcher, the globe, she started, but he shook his head. From my father, and before you protest, he was going to donate it anyway. A teacher cannot teach geography without a proper globe. Thank you, she said softly, then added with a slight smile, and thank you for the excuse to see you in the middle of the day. His answering grin was quick and private. I will take any excuse I can get. How is the first day going? Wonderfully, terrifyingly, both at once. She glanced back at the schoolhouse where she could hear the murmur of children's voices. I should get back, of course, but Sarah. He waited until she looked at him. You are doing great, I can already tell. She carried that warmth back into the schoolhouse with her and found renewed energy for the afternoon lessons. That Sunday, Fletcher arrived at her cottage in a freshly washed wagon with a bouquet of wildflowers that he admitted he had picked himself that morning. I would have bought roses from the catalog, he said, but I thought you might like these better. They are from the hills near the ranch. Sarah took the flowers, a riot of gold and purple and white, and buried her face in them. They are perfect, much better than roses. They drove out of town into the Golden Hills, following dirt roads that wound through oak groves and past ranches where cattle grazed. Fletcher talked about the land, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories. He told her about coming to California from Texas 5 years ago, about falling in love with this valley with its mild climate and fertile soil. What brought you here? Sarah asked, watching the play of sunlight through the oak leaves. My father wanted a fresh start after my mother passed, Fletcher said quietly. She died of fever when I was 18. Everything in Texas reminded him of her, so we came west, found San Jose, and decided to stay. He bought the store, I found work on the Carlisle Ranch, and we built a new life. I am sorry about your mother. Sarah knew the inadequacy of those words, but offered them anyway. Thank you, she would have liked you. Fletcher smiled, though it was edged with old grief. She believed in education, in self-improvement. She taught me to read using whatever books she could get her hands on. I think that is partly why I admire what you do. Teaching is not just a job, it is a calling. They stopped by a creek where water burbled over smooth stones, and Fletcher spread a blanket in the shade. He had brought sandwiches from the boarding house, apples from his ranch, and cookies that Mrs. Patterson had baked. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Books they had read, places they wanted to see, dreams they harbored. I always wanted to travel, Sarah admitted. See Boston, New York, maybe even Europe someday, but that was before. She gestured vaguely at her face. After the accident, those dreams seemed foolish. Who would want a scarred woman traveling alone? A brave one, Fletcher said immediately. And you would not have to travel alone. You could travel with someone who wanted to see those places too. The implication hung in the air between them, a future sketched in possibilities. Sarah changed the subject, not ready to examine that too closely, but Fletcher's words stayed with her. As September turned into October, their courtship became an established fact in San Jose. Fletcher came to town 3 times a week without fail, timing his arrivals for when school let out. He would help Sarah clean up the classroom, discuss her students' progress, and walk her back to her cottage. On Sundays, they went on long drives through the countryside, exploring the valley and talking endlessly. And true to his word, Fletcher proved her mother wrong every single day. He brought her books from San Francisco, special ordered through the store, selections chosen specifically for her interests. When she mentioned loving astronomy, he brought her a book about the stars, and they spent an evening on her porch identifying constellations. When autumn rains came early and her cottage roof leaked, he spent an entire Saturday patching it, refusing payment beyond the lunch she made for him. When one of her students, a 12-year-old named Emma, came to school with bruises from an abusive father, Fletcher helped Sarah navigate the difficult situation, accompanying her to speak with the sheriff and offering the Carlisle Ranch as a safe place for the girl to stay until her uncle from Sacramento could come for her. You did not have to get involved, Sarah told him afterward, drained from the emotional confrontation. This was not your problem. You were involved, which made it my problem, Fletcher said simply. Besides, no child should suffer like that. If we can help, we should. It was actions like these that burrowed into Sarah's heart and took root. Fletcher did not just speak pretty words. He lived by his principles, stood up for what was right, and showed up consistently and reliably. He was, she realized with growing certainty, exactly the kind of man she had never believed existed, but there were obstacles. The social expectations of the time weighed heavily. Fletcher was patient with the physical boundaries of courtship, never pushing beyond holding her hand or the occasional chaste kiss on her cheek. But Sarah could feel the tension building between them, the awareness that their courtship would eventually need to move toward either marriage or ending, and neither of them wanted it to end. The real problem was Sarah herself. Despite Fletcher's daily proof of his affection, despite his clear devotion, a small part of her still heard her mother's voice insisting this could not last, that he would eventually see what everyone else saw and turn away. The breaking point came in early November, 6 weeks after their courtship began. The town was preparing for a harvest dance, the social event of the season, and Fletcher had asked Sarah to attend with him. She had agreed, though the thought of being on display, of having the whole town watch them together, made her anxious. The night before the dance, Sarah stood before her small mirror, trying on the new dress she had made for the occasion. The fabric was a deep blue that matched her eyes, and she had worked careful stitches by lamplight for weeks. It was the prettiest thing she had owned in years, and all she could see was the scar. In the merciful dimness of everyday life, she could almost forget it. But in candlelight, preparing for a dance where she would be beside Fletcher's handsome face, it seemed more grotesque than ever. The puckered skin, the way it pulled her mouth slightly to one side, the shiny texture that marked her as damaged. What was she thinking, agreeing to go? Everyone would stare. They would wonder what Fletcher saw in her. They would pity him for feeling obligated to court the scarred schoolteacher out of misplaced kindness. By the time Fletcher arrived the next evening to escort her to the dance, Sarah had worked herself into a state of quiet panic. She opened the door with her heart pounding, wearing her old everyday dress instead of the blue one. "I cannot go," she said before he could speak. "I am sorry, Fletcher. I know you were looking forward to it, but I cannot." Fletcher's expression shifted from surprise to concerned. "Are you ill? Do you need me to fetch the doctor?" "No, I am fine. I just cannot go to the dance." She could not meet his eyes, staring instead at the porch boards beneath his polished boots. "You should go without me. I am sure there are plenty of women who would be happy to dance with you, Sarah." His voice was gentle but firm. "Look at me, please." She forced herself to raise her eyes to his face. "What is this really about?" he asked. "Did something happen? Did someone say something to you?" "No one had to say anything," Sarah burst out, all her fears spilling over. "Fletcher, have you looked at me? Really looked at me? I am scarred and damaged, and I have no business standing beside you at a town dance where everyone can see and judge and wonder what on earth you are thinking." "I see," Fletcher said quietly. He stepped into the cottage without invitation and closed the door behind him. "May I tell you what I see when I look at you? Fletcher, please do not. I see a woman who survived something that would have broken most people," he continued as if she had not spoken. "I see intelligence in your eyes and strength in the set of your jaw. I see someone who left everything familiar to teach children she had never met. I see the woman I am falling in love with, Sarah. The scar is part of you, yes, but it is not all of you. It is not even the most interesting thing about you." Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the sob building in her chest. "My mother said no man would ever love me. She said I was unlovable now." Fletcher closed the distance between them and carefully, giving her every chance to pull away, cupped her face in his hands. Both sides, scarred and unscarred, with equal reverence. "Then your mother was wrong, and I am going to keep proving it to you until you believe me. Every single day, Sarah. For as long as it takes." "How can you be so sure?" she whispered. "Because I know my own heart." His thumbs traced gentle circles on her cheeks. "Because when I am with you, everything makes sense. Because you challenge me and inspire me and make me want to be better. Because I look forward to our conversations more than anything else in my week. Because when you smile, really smile, it feels like watching the sun come up." Fletcher. His name came out broken, barely a breath. "I am in love with you," he said clearly, letting each word land with weight and intention. "Completely, absolutely, without reservation. And if you feel even a fraction of that for me, then please put on whatever dress you want and come to this dance with me. Let me show this whole town that you are mine and I am proud of it." Sarah searched his face and found only truth there, no pity or obligation or secret doubt, just clear, certain love looking back at her. "I am terrified," she admitted. "Of me, of believing this, of trusting it. Of what happens if it turns out to be temporary." Fletcher rested his forehead against hers, a gesture so tender it made her ache. "I cannot promise life will be easy, Sarah. I cannot promise we will not face hardships or challenges, but I can promise you this: my love for you is not temporary. It is not conditional on your appearance or anything else. It is yours, free and clear, for as long as you want it." She took a shaking breath, and then another. She thought of the past 2 months, of every time Fletcher had shown up, kept his word, proved himself reliable and true. She thought of her mother's voice, trying to protect her from heartbreak by convincing her she was unworthy of love. And she thought about which voice she wanted to believe. "Give me 10 minutes to change," she said. The smile that broke across Fletcher's face was worth every ounce of fear. Sarah wore the blue dress, and Fletcher told her she looked beautiful, and she almost believed him. They arrived at the town hall where the dance was being held to find it packed with families and couples. Lanterns hung from the rafters, a small band played fiddles and guitars, and long tables groaned under the weight of contributed food. As they entered, conversations paused. People noticed exactly as Sarah had feared, but Fletcher did not seem to notice or care. He kept her hand tucked firmly in the crook of his arm and led her into the room with his head high and a smile on his face. "Fletcher, Miss Zimmerman," Mrs. Patterson bustled over, beaming. "Do not you two look lovely together? Sarah, that dress is absolutely stunning on you." "Did you make it yourself?" Other people approached, parents of her students, thanking her for her work at the school. Shopkeepers and ranchers Fletcher knew, greeting them as a couple with easy acceptance. Young William Patterson tugged on Sarah's skirt to show her a loose tooth. Mary O'Brien's mother invited them both to Sunday dinner, and when the music started and Fletcher led her onto the dance floor, Sarah realized something profound. No one was staring at her scar. They were looking at Fletcher's obvious devotion, at the way he held her as if she were precious, at the happiness evident in both their faces. "See," Fletcher murmured as they swayed to the music. "Nothing to be afraid of." "You make it seem easy," Sarah said, letting herself relax into his arms, into the moment, into the possibility of being loved. "Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done," he replied, and she believed him. As autumn deepened into winter, Sarah's life took on a rhythm that felt almost dreamlike in its contentment. Her students thrived under her teaching, the schoolhouse became a center of community activity, and Fletcher's courtship continued with steady devotion. He came to Sunday dinners at her cottage, where they cooked together and talked late into the evening. He brought her mother's recipe for stew handwritten in his careful script, and they made it together while he told stories about growing up in Texas. She made him her grandmother's apple pie, and he declared it the best thing he had ever tasted. They went on long rides through the valley on crisp December days, bundled against the cold. Fletcher taught her to ride astride instead of side saddle, scandalous but practical, and she discovered a freedom in it she had never known. They explored the Twisted Creek Ranch where Fletcher worked, and she met the horses he had trained, each one responding to his voice and touch with trust that spoke to his gentle nature. He brought her small gifts constantly, a hair ribbon that matched her eyes, a book of poetry, a smooth river stone she had admired on one of their walks. Each gift came with the same explanation: "I saw it and thought of you." And true to his promise, Fletcher proved her mother wrong every single day, not through grand gestures but through consistent, reliable love. He showed up when he said he would. He listened when she spoke. He supported her work and celebrated her successes. When she had a difficult day, he offered comfort. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of her strength. In late December, a week before Christmas, Fletcher invited Sarah to dinner at the ranch. "I want you to meet Daniel Carlisle properly," he explained. "He is more than my employer. He has been like a second father to me, and his opinion matters." Sarah felt the weight of that invitation. Meeting important people in Fletcher's life meant their relationship was progressing toward something permanent, something she both wanted desperately and feared in equal measure. The Carlisle Ranch House was an impressive adobe structure with a wide veranda and windows that glowed warm in the winter twilight. Daniel Carlisle turned out to be a man in his late 40s with graying hair and kind eyes. His wife had died several years ago, Fletcher had told her, and his son Thomas was Sarah's student. "Miss Zimmerman," Daniel greeted her warmly. "Thomas speaks highly of you. He says you make even mathematics interesting, which I consider a minor miracle." Dinner was pleasant, the conversation easy. Daniel asked thoughtful questions about her teaching philosophy and shared his own views on education. Thomas was polite but clearly embarrassed by his father's attention to his schoolteacher. Fletcher was more relaxed than Sarah had ever seen him, laughing easily, comfortable in this place that was clearly his second home. After dinner, Daniel excused himself to check on a mare about to foal, taking Thomas with him. Fletcher and Sarah stood on the veranda, looking out at the dark hills studded with stars. "He likes you," Fletcher said. "I could tell. I liked him too. You are fortunate to work for someone you respect. I am fortunate in many ways." Fletcher took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Sarah, we have been courting for 4 months now. I know." Her heart began to beat faster. I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I suspect I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. He turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. I want a future with you. Marriage, a home, children if we are blessed with them. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to build a life together. Sarah's breath caught. Fletcher, I know I should wait longer, be more patient. The proper thing would be to court you for at least a year. But Sarah, I have never been good at pretending, and I cannot pretend I want to wait. I am certain of this. I am certain of you of us. I am not, Sarah whispered. Certain, I mean. Fletcher, you deserve someone whole, someone beautiful, someone who can stand beside you without people wondering why. He pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cradle her scarred cheek. Stop. Stop letting your mother's words define you. You are whole. You are beautiful. And the only people wondering anything are wondering how I got lucky enough to win your heart. You really believe that? I know it. He kissed her forehead, then her unscarred cheek, then, with infinite gentleness, the ridge of scar tissue she had learned to hate. Every part of you is worth loving. Tears slipped down Sarah's face, but they were different from the bitter tears of her past. These were tears of release, of old beliefs cracking open to let in light. I love you, she said, the words feeling momentous and terrifying and absolutely true. I love you so much it scares me. Then be scared with me, Fletcher said. Take the risk with me. Marry me, Sarah. Make me the happiest man in California and say you will be my wife. She should have asked for more time. She should have been practical and cautious and sensible. Instead, she heard herself say, yes, yes, I will marry you. Fletcher let out a shout of joy that probably carried all the way to town and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around until she laughed breathlessly. When he set her down, he kissed her, a real kiss this time, not the chaste pecks of their courtship but something deeper, full of promise and passion and desperate love. I will make you happy, he promised against her lips. I swear I will spend every day of my life making you happy. You already do, she said. Every single day. They were married on the first Saturday of January 1878 in San Jose's small church with what felt like the entire town in attendance. Sarah wore a new dress of cream-colored silk that Fletcher had insisted on buying, with orange blossoms in her hair from the Carlisle orchard. Fletcher wore his best suit, his hair slicked back, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle on Mr. Patterson's arm, her father being too far away in Missouri to attend. The ceremony was simple but profound. Fletcher's voice was steady as he spoke his vows, promising to love and cherish her in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as they both lived. Sarah's voice shook slightly as she made her own promises, but she meant every word with her whole heart. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Fletcher kissed her thoroughly enough to make the older ladies fan themselves and the children giggle. Sarah did not care. She was married to Fletcher Turner, the man who had proved her mother wrong in every possible way, and she felt like she could float away with happiness. The town had organized a reception in the hall where they had attended the harvest dance. There was food and music and dancing. Her students had made her cards and drawings. The women of the town had contributed to a collection of household items to help them start their life together. Daniel Carlisle gave them a beautiful set of horses as a wedding gift. For your new home, he said with a knowing smile, and Sarah realized this had been planned. New home, she asked Fletcher as they danced. I was going to wait until after the wedding to tell you, Fletcher admitted, but Daniel has offered us a position managing his northern pastures. There is a house there, small but good, about 3 miles from the main ranch. I would still work for him, but we would have our own place, our own land eventually if we save carefully. What about the schoolhouse, my teaching? Only if you want to continue, Fletcher said quickly. I can support us on my salary, but if you want to keep teaching, Daniel said we can work out a schedule, or you could take some time off or maybe teach fewer days. Whatever you want, Sarah, this is our life to build together. She felt another crack in the old fears, another piece of her mother's voice losing its power. Fletcher was not just promising to love her. He was promising to be her partner, to value her dreams and ambitions, to build a life where she could be fully herself. "I would like to keep teaching," she said, "at least for now. Maybe in a few years when we have children, I will take time away, but for now I love those students too much to leave them." "Then that is what we will do," Fletcher said simply and kissed her again. They spent their wedding night in Fletcher's room at the boarding house, the only private space available on short notice. In the morning, they would move to their new home on the Carlisle ranch. But that night, in the small room with its narrow bed and single window, Sarah and Fletcher began their married life. Fletcher was patient and gentle, understanding this was new territory for Sarah. He took his time, asking permission with every touch, making sure she felt safe and loved. There was awkwardness, as there always is with first times, but there was also tenderness and gradually building passion. Afterward, lying in Fletcher's arms with her head on his chest, Sarah felt something settle deep in her soul. This was right. This was real. She was loved, truly and completely, by a good man who saw her for who she actually was. "What are you thinking?" Fletcher asked, his fingers trailing lazily through her hair. "That I am happy," Sarah said, "that I never thought I could be this happy. That you make me believe in things I thought were impossible." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You make me believe in things too, like maybe I am better than I thought I was, because you see something worth loving. You are everything worth loving," she said fiercely. "You are kind and honest and good. You work hard and keep your word and stand up for what is right. You are exactly the man I would have wished for if I had believed wishes could come true." Fletcher pulled her closer, and they lay together in the quiet dark, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen each other despite every reason to be afraid. "Every day," Fletcher murmured sleepily. "Every single day I will prove your mother wrong." "I know," Sarah whispered. "I believe you." Their new home was a whitewashed house with 3 rooms, a wide porch, and a view of rolling hills that took Sarah's breath away. It was furnished simply but adequately, with furniture Daniel had provided and items from their wedding gifts. Fletcher carried Sarah over the threshold, laughing at the tradition but honoring it nonetheless, and they spent their first full day as a married couple making the space their own. They hung Sarah's books on newly built shelves. They arranged the kitchen with her grandmother's cast iron skillet and his mother's mixing bowls. They made up the bed with the quilt Mrs. Patterson had sewn as a wedding gift and stood back to admire their handiwork. "It is perfect," Sarah said, and meant it. Not perfect in the sense of being grand or luxurious, but perfect for them. A space that was theirs alone. Fletcher arranged for her to continue teaching 3 days a week, Monday through Wednesday, with the other 2 days spent at home. He built a desk for her by the window where she could prepare lessons and grade papers with a view of the hills she was learning to love. He bought her more books, always more books, from catalogs and San Francisco shops. Their life together developed its own rhythm. Fletcher rose before dawn to begin his work with the horses and cattle. Sarah would wake to find coffee already made, a note left on the kitchen table with some endearment that made her smile. On teaching days, he would saddle her horse and see her off, kissing her goodbye with promises to have dinner ready when she returned. The arrangement worked beautifully. Sarah's students continued to thrive, and the school board was satisfied with the part-time schedule, especially given that she had married a local man and planned to stay permanently. Sarah discovered she enjoyed the balance between teaching and homemaking, between the intellectual stimulation of education and the physical satisfaction of building a home. And Fletcher proved her mother wrong in countless small ways. He never complained about her work or asked her to give it up. He supported her ambitions and encouraged her dreams. When she came home frustrated about a difficult lesson or a struggling student, he listened and offered suggestions without trying to fix everything. When she succeeded, he celebrated with genuine joy. He left notes around the house for her to find. "You are beautiful" tucked into her book of poetry. "I love you" written in the steam on the mirror. "Thank you for being mine" slipped into her lesson plans. He brought her wildflowers from the hills. He learned to braid her hair the way she liked it. He rubbed her feet after long teaching days and listened to her read aloud from her favorite books in the evenings. And in their bedroom, behind closed doors, he loved her with a passion and reverence that made her feel cherished beyond measure. He mapped every inch of her body, including her scars, with his hands and lips, making her believe what she had never believed before. That she was desirable, that she was wanted, that her body was a source of joy rather than shame. Spring arrived, painting the California hills in impossible green studded with wildflowers. Sarah and Fletcher took long rides on their days off, exploring the valley, having picnics by the creek, making love under oak trees with the sun filtering through the leaves. "I want to show you something," Fletcher said one Sunday in late March. He led her to a spot on their property where the view opened up to show miles of rolling landscape. "I have been thinking. In a few years, when we have saved enough, I want to buy land of our own, build our own ranch. Daniel has been teaching me everything about running a successful operation, and I think we could do it." Sarah looked at the vista before them, imagining a future written in that landscape. "Our own ranch, our own land. With a big house," Fletcher continued, warming to the vision. "Enough bedrooms for however many children we are blessed with, a library for all your books, a porch where we can sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. What do you think?" "I think it sounds like a dream," Sarah said honestly. "Dreams can come true," Fletcher said. "You are proof of that. I dreamed of finding someone like you, and here you are." She turned to him, this man who saw possibilities where she had seen only limitations. "How did I get so lucky? I ask myself the same thing every day." He pulled her close, and they stood together looking out at their future, already building it in their minds and hearts. In June, Sarah realized her monthly courses were late. Then a week went by, then two. Morning sickness confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was carrying Fletcher's child. She told him on a Saturday evening, nervous despite knowing he would be happy. They were sitting on the porch watching the sun set, and she simply reached for his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is someone new for you to love," she said. It took him a moment to understand. When he did, his face transformed with wonder and joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. "Sarah, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. But yes, Fletcher, we are going to have a baby." He gathered her into his arms with exquisite care, as if she had suddenly become fragile. "A baby, our baby. Sarah, you are giving me everything I never knew I wanted." "We are in this together," she reminded him. "I am not giving you anything. We are building this together." "Together," he agreed, and kissed her with such tenderness she felt it in her bones. The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered terrible morning sickness that lasted well past the first 3 months. She was exhausted constantly and had to reduce her teaching schedule even further. Fletcher worried incessantly, hovering and fretting until Sarah had to gently remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time. But his worry came from love, and she could not fault him for that. He took over all the heavy household tasks. He brought her bland foods that would not upset her stomach. He rubbed her back when it ached and held her hair when she was sick. He read to her in the evenings when she was too tired to read herself. "You do not have to do all this," she told him one night as he brought her peppermint tea for her nausea. "Yes, I do," he said simply. "You are growing our child. The least I can do is make you comfortable." By late summer, Sarah's condition was obvious and she had to stop teaching altogether. She missed her students terribly, but lacked the energy to manage a classroom. Instead, she focused on preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, reading everything she could find about infant care. Fletcher built a cradle that was a work of art, lovingly sanded smooth and carved with delicate patterns. "I want our baby to have the best," he explained when Sarah protested it was too fine. "Our baby will have the best because it will have you as a father," she said, watching him work. Their son was born in early January 1879, on a cold, clear night with stars brilliant overhead. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Sarah wondered if she would survive it. But Fletcher never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, telling her she was strong enough she could do this. He believed in her. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Fletcher wept openly. "A son," he kept saying. "Sarah, we have a son." They named him Frederick William Turner, Frederick for Fletcher's father, William for Sarah's father, both of them too far away to meet the child yet, but honored nonetheless. Freddie, as he quickly became, had his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes and a healthy set of lungs that he exercised frequently. Sarah fell in love all over again watching Fletcher with their son. He was a natural father, patient and gentle and endlessly devoted. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor at night when Freddie was fussy, and sang soft songs in his deep voice that somehow always calmed the baby. "You are amazing with him," Sarah said one night, watching Fletcher rock their sleeping son. "He is easy to love," Fletcher replied. "Like his mother. Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "Marrying me, your life would be simpler if you had chosen someone else." Fletcher looked at her with such fierce love it took her breath away. "Sarah Turner, you listen to me. I have never regretted marrying you for one single second. You gave me a life worth living, a home worth coming back to, and now this beautiful boy. Simple is overrated. I will take our complicated, wonderful, messy, perfect life over simple any day of the week." He kept proving her mother wrong, every single day, just as he had promised. The years that followed were full and rich. Freddie grew from infant to toddler to small boy with Fletcher's quick smile and Sarah's love of learning. Sarah returned to teaching part-time when he was 2, and Fletcher's mother-in-law from Missouri came to live with them to help with childcare, finally able to meet the grandson she had only known through letters. Martha Zimmerman was a woman transformed by time and regret. When she arrived, the first thing she did was embrace Sarah and apologize, tears streaming down her weathered face. "I was wrong," she said, "so desperately wrong. I thought I was protecting you by preparing you for rejection. Instead, I nearly convinced you that you were unlovable, and that is a sin I will regret for the rest of my life. Can you forgive me?" Sarah, who had grown in grace and confidence over the years of being loved by Fletcher, found forgiveness easier than she expected. "I forgive you, Mother. You did your best with what you knew. You have a good husband," Martha said, watching Fletcher play with Freddie in the yard. "The kind of man I prayed existed but never thought you would find. He sees you the way you deserve to be seen." "He taught me how to see myself that way too," Sarah admitted. In 1881, Fletcher and Sarah bought their own land, 200 acres of beautiful valley property with a creek running through it and hills perfect for grazing cattle. They built the house Fletcher had dreamed of, big enough for a growing family, with a library for Sarah's ever-expanding book collection and a wide porch where they spent evenings together. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace Martha Turner, was born in 1882, followed 2 years later by another son, Henry Daniel Turner. The house filled with noise and laughter, with children's games and family meals, with all the chaos and joy of a thriving family. Fletcher proved to be as good a rancher as he was a husband and father. Their ranch prospered, earning a reputation for quality horses and well-managed cattle. Sarah continued teaching, now in a small school built on their own property for children from surrounding ranches, combining her passion for education with her love of home. And through it all, through the challenges and triumphs, the difficult seasons and the abundant ones, Fletcher never wavered in his devotion. He still left notes for Sarah to find. He still brought her wildflowers. He still looked at her with the same wonder he had shown that first day in his father's store, as if he could not quite believe his good fortune. "Do you know what today is?" Fletcher asked one evening in August 1887. They were sitting on their porch, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and orange. The children were asleep inside, the ranch was quiet, and they had this moment to themselves. "Should I?" Sarah asked, trying to remember if she had forgotten something important. 10 years ago today, you arrived in San Jose," Fletcher said. 10 years since you walked into my father's store and changed my life forever." Sarah reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together the way they had 1,000 times before. "Has it been everything you hoped?" "It has been more," Fletcher said. "Sarah, I loved you from almost the first moment I saw you, but I did not realize then how deep love could go, how many layers it has. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day. I love you more than I did yesterday. And I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is how it works. Love grows." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, this man who had become her whole world. My mother was wrong about me, but I was wrong too. I thought survival was enough. I thought just getting through life was all I could hope for. You taught me that life can be more than survived, it can be celebrated. We taught each other, Fletcher corrected. You taught me what courage looks like, what strength really means, how to see past surfaces to the truth underneath. He kissed the top of her head, then added with a smile in his voice, "And you gave me 3 beautiful children and a life that makes me grateful every single day." Every single day, Sarah echoed, smiling at the phrase that had become their promise to each other. The years continued to unfold with all the unpredictability of life. There were hard seasons when drought tested their ranch, when children fell sick and frightened them, when unexpected expenses strained their resources. But there were also seasons of abundance, of growth, of watching their children flourish and their dreams take shape in reality. Freddie grew into a thoughtful young man who loved books as much as his mother and horses as much as his father, a perfect blend of both parents. Grace was fierce and independent, determined to prove girls could do anything boys could, and her parents encouraged that spirit. Henry was the charmer, quick with a joke and quicker with affection, keeping the whole family entertained. Sarah's students from those early teaching years grew up and had children of their own, some of whom ended up in her classroom. She watched generations learn and grow, and found immense satisfaction in knowing she had contributed something meaningful to her community. Fletcher expanded their ranch carefully and thoughtfully, never overextending but always moving forward. By the mid-1890s, the Turner Ranch was one of the most respected operations in the valley, known for fair dealing and quality stock. But more than their material success, Fletcher and Sarah built a marriage that served as a testament to the power of faithful love. They weathered disagreements and challenges by talking through problems rather than letting resentment fester. They supported each other's dreams and celebrated each other's victories. They maintained the romance of their early courtship even as they settled into the comfortable familiarity of long marriage. Fletcher never stopped leaving love notes. Sarah never stopped reading to him in the evenings. They still took rides through the hills on Sunday afternoons when they could steal the time. They still looked at each other across crowded rooms and shared private smiles. They still held hands on the porch watching sunsets, still whispered endearments in the dark, still chose each other every single day. As their children grew toward adulthood, Sarah and Fletcher found themselves with more time alone together, and they used it well. They finally took that trip Sarah had dreamed of, traveling to San Francisco and spending a week exploring the city, staying in a fine hotel, and pretending they were newlyweds again. They talked about expanding the ranch's operations or perhaps focusing more on horse breeding. They made plans for their future while cherishing their present. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if we had not met?" Sarah asked Fletcher one night. They were in their late 40s now, gray threading through their hair, laugh lines etched at the corners of their eyes. "Never," Fletcher said immediately. "That is not a life I care to imagine. This is the only life I want. This life with you, with our children, with everything we have built together. This is enough. This is everything." Sarah thought about the young woman who had arrived in San Jose 30 years ago, convinced she was unlovable, certain her scarred face defined her worth. She thought about how Fletcher had systematically dismantled those beliefs, not through words alone but through consistent, reliable love that proved day after day that she was cherished exactly as she was. "You know what the greatest gift you gave me was?" Sarah asked. "What?" "You taught me that my mother was wrong, not just about men loving me, but about everything. She taught me to see myself as damaged, as less than, as something to be pitied or endured. You taught me to see myself as whole, as valuable, as worthy of love and respect. You gave me back myself, Fletcher. That is the real miracle." Fletcher pulled her close, and they sat together in the quiet of their home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life. Photographs of their children on the walls, books filling the shelves. Comfortable furniture worn by years of use, a home built on love and maintained by commitment. "I only showed you what was always true," Fletcher said. "The love was always inside you, Sarah. You just needed someone to help you see it." In 1897, 20 years after they first met, Fletcher and Sarah celebrated their anniversary by hosting a party for the whole community. Their ranch was filled with friends and neighbors, with former students and business associates, with everyone who had watched their love story unfold over 2 decades. Freddie, now 18 and preparing to attend university, gave a toast that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "My parents taught me what love looks like," he said, raising his glass. "Not the romantic fantasy of storybooks, but real love, the kind that shows up every day, the kind that chooses patience over anger, understanding over judgment, commitment over convenience. They have proven that true love is not about perfection. It is about persistence." Grace, 16 and already turning away suitors with her impossibly high standards, added, "Father told me once that the right person will make you believe you are capable of anything. He said the right person will see your strength even when you feel weak, will celebrate your victories without jealousy, and will love you most fiercely on your worst days. He said that is how he loves Mother. That is what I am waiting for." Henry, 14 and still convinced his parents were hopelessly old-fashioned in the best way, simply said, "I want what you have. Everyone should be so lucky." Fletcher looked at Sarah across the crowded room, and she knew he was remembering that day 30 years ago when she had stepped off the stagecoach, when he had seen past her scar to the woman beneath, when he had decided with absolute certainty that she was someone worth knowing. That night, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, Fletcher and Sarah walked out to the spot where he had proposed 20 years earlier, where they had stood and imagined their future. "We did it," Sarah said, looking up at the stars. "We built the life you dreamed of." "We built better than I dreamed," Fletcher corrected. "I dreamed of a house and land. We built a home and a legacy. I dreamed of children. We created a family bound by more than blood, bound by love and respect and genuine affection. I dreamed of being happy. We found joy." He turned to her, taking both her hands in his, and Sarah saw in his face the same love she had seen at their wedding, deepened now by years and experience, but unchanged in its essential nature. "Your mother told you no man would ever love you," Fletcher said, the words deliberate and weighted. "She was wrong then, and she would be wrong now, and she would be wrong tomorrow. I have loved you every single day since I met you, Sarah Turner. I will love you every single day until I draw my last breath, and if there is anything beyond this life, I will love you there too. That is my promise. That is my truth. That is my absolute, unwavering fact." Sarah stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, this man who had proven impossible things possible, who had taught her that love was not earned but given, not conditional but absolute. "And I love you, Fletcher Turner, with everything I am and everything I will ever be. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for proving every single day that love is real." They stood together under the stars, two people who had found each other against odds, who had built a life from determination and devotion, who had created something lasting and true from the raw materials of hope and daily choice. The years continued to pass, as years do, bringing changes both expected and surprising. Their children grew and went out into the world, carrying with them the lessons of love and commitment they had learned from watching their parents. Freddie became a teacher like his mother, opening a school in Sacramento. Grace married a rancher she met at university, someone who matched her fire and respected her independence. Henry took over the management of the Turner Ranch, proving he had inherited his father's gift with horses and land. Sarah and Fletcher became grandparents, and then grandparents again and again. They watched a new generation grow up on the ranch, teaching their grandchildren to ride, to read, to see the beauty in the world around them. As they moved into their 60s and then 70s, their pace slowed, but their love did not diminish. If anything, it deepened further, mellowed by time into something even more precious than the passionate romance of their youth. They had weathered every storm together, celebrated every joy together, grown old together with grace and gratitude. Sarah's hair turned completely silver, and Fletcher told her she had never been more beautiful. Fletcher's hands grew gnarled with arthritis, and Sarah massaged them gently every evening, grateful for all the work those hands had done, all the love they had expressed. They still sat on the porch watching sunsets. They still held hands everywhere they went. They still looked at each other with the wonder of people who could not quite believe their good fortune. In the spring of 1907, 30 years after Sarah had arrived in San Jose, Fletcher and Sarah took one more ride through their hills. They were slower now, their horses walking rather than running, but the beauty of the landscape had not diminished, and neither had their appreciation for it. "Do you have any regrets?" Sarah asked, a question she had asked before over the years, always curious about his answer. "Not a single one," Fletcher replied, the same answer he always gave, but this time he elaborated. "Sarah, you gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. You let me love you. You trusted me with your heart even when you were terrified. You built a life with me, raised children with me, grew old with me. Every day I have spent with you has been a gift. How could I possibly regret any of it?" Sarah reached across the small distance between their horses and took his hand. "My mother told me no man would ever love me. She was trying to prepare me for a life alone. Instead, I found you, and you have spent 50 years proving her wrong." 40, Fletcher corrected with a smile. 50, Sarah insisted. "From the moment we met until now. 40 years married, but 50 years of you proving every single day that love is real and I am worthy of it." They rode back to the ranch slowly, savoring the spring air, the wildflowers painting the hills, the life they had built together. When they reached the barn, Henry was there to take their horses, and Sarah and Fletcher walked hand in hand to the house they had built, the home they had filled with love. That night, lying in bed with Fletcher's arms around her, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fire that had scarred her, her mother's words that had wounded deeper than any physical injury, the leap of faith it had taken to believe Fletcher when he said she was lovable. The daily choice to trust that love, to build on it, to let it transform her understanding of herself and the world. "Fletcher," she whispered into the darkness. "Yes, my love, thank you for proving her wrong every single day, just like you promised." "It was never a hardship," Fletcher replied, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. "Loving you has been the easiest, most natural thing I have ever done. It is as necessary as breathing, as simple as sunrise, every single day for as long as I live." "For as long as we both live," Sarah corrected. "For as long as we both live," Fletcher agreed. And in the quiet of their home, surrounded by evidence of their shared life, they fell asleep together as they had for 40 years. Two people who had found in each other the truest, deepest, most lasting kind of love. The years rolled on gently for Sarah and Fletcher Turner. They settled into their 70s, with the kind of contentment that comes from a life well lived and love well maintained. Their ranch continued to thrive under Henry's capable management, and they transitioned into the role of elder advisors, offering wisdom when asked, but trusting their son's judgment. Their golden wedding anniversary in 1928 was celebrated with even more fanfare than their 20th. The whole valley seemed to turn out for the occasion, filling their ranch with 3 generations of people whose lives had been touched by the Turner family. Former students, now middle-aged with children of their own, spoke of how Sarah had inspired them. Business partners praised Fletcher's integrity and fair dealing. Grandchildren performed skits and songs, making everyone laugh, but the most touching moment came when their 3 children stood together to honor their parents. Freddie, now 51 and gray-haired himself, spoke of watching his father leave love notes for his mother for 5 decades. Grace, 48 and still fierce, talked about how her parents had shown her that love did not require sacrifice of self, but rather the full expression of 2 complete people choosing each other. Henry, 46, and running the ranch with skill that would have made his father proud, simply said that his parents had given him an impossible standard to live up to, and he was grateful for it every day. 50 years ago, Fletcher said when it was his turn to speak, his voice still strong despite his age, "I met a young woman who believed she was unlovable. Her mother had told her no man would ever love her, and she had accepted that as truth. But I saw something different. I saw courage and intelligence and beauty that went far deeper than any surface could show. I saw someone worth knowing, worth loving, worth building a life with." He turned to Sarah, taking her hands in his. I promised you, my darling Sarah, that I would prove your mother wrong every single day. It is a promise I have kept, not out of duty but out of joy. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Every day with you has been a gift. Every moment has been precious, and if I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Sarah, whose face was now lined with age but whose gray eyes still sparkled with intelligence and warmth, smiled at him with all the love of 5 decades. You gave me back my life, Fletcher Turner. You taught me that I was worth loving, that my scars did not define me, that I could be more than what I thought possible. You proved my mother wrong, yes, but more importantly, you proved that love is not just an emotion but a choice made daily, a commitment honored hourly, a promise kept for a lifetime. They kissed then, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered, and Sarah felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt at their first kiss, proof that some things never fade with time. As they moved into their late 70s and early 80s, their pace slowed further. Fletcher's arthritis worsened, and Sarah developed some memory issues that came and went. But they faced these challenges the same way they had faced everything, together, with grace and humor and unwavering support for each other. On the harder days, when Fletcher's hands hurt too much to write, Sarah would take dictation for the love notes he still insisted on leaving around the house. On the days when Sarah's memory was foggy and she felt frustrated and scared, Fletcher would hold her close and remind her of their story, walking her through the memories until she felt anchored again. "We met in August of 1877, he would say. You walked into my father's store and I knew immediately you were someone special. We courted for 4 months and I asked you to marry me at the ranch. You said yes, and we were married in January of 1878. We built this house together, raised 3 children together, created a life together. That is our story, Sarah. That is our truth. And nothing, not time or age or anything else, can take that away from us." In the early autumn of 1932, as the leaves on the oak trees turned gold and the air carried the first hint of approaching winter, Fletcher fell ill. It started as a simple cold, but developed into pneumonia that his 80-year-old body struggled to fight. Sarah stayed by his bedside constantly, holding his hand, reading to him when he was awake, praying when he slept. Their children came, bringing grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The house filled with family, 3 generations gathering to say goodbye to the patriarch who had built not just a ranch, but a legacy of love. On a quiet evening, with Sarah sitting beside him and their family keeping vigil in the next room, Fletcher opened his eyes and looked at his wife with perfect clarity. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice weak but his gaze strong. "I am here," she said, squeezing his hand. "I am right here, my love." 55 years, he said. Every single day I proved her wrong, did I not? Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but she smiled. "Every single day, Fletcher Turner, you never missed one. I love you," he said. "More than my first breath, more than my last. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. And you were mine," Sarah said, leaning close so he could see her clearly. "You taught me how to be loved. You showed me what devotion looks like. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. Thank you, Fletcher. Thank you for everything." "No regrets?" he asked, the question they had traded for 55 years. "Not a single one," she confirmed. "Only gratitude, only love." Fletcher smiled, that same smile that had captured her heart more than half a century ago, and closed his eyes. He died peacefully a few hours later, surrounded by family, his hand still held in Sarah's. The funeral was enormous, the church packed to overflowing with people whose lives Fletcher had touched. They spoke of his integrity, his kindness, his steadfast nature. But Sarah knew the truth that lay beneath all those words. Fletcher Turner had been a man who understood that love was not a feeling but an action, not a moment, but a lifetime of moments strung together by choice and commitment. After the funeral, Sarah returned to the house they had built, the home they had filled with love. Her children wanted her to move in with one of them, to not be alone, but she gently declined. "This is where I belong," she said. "This house holds every memory, every moment. I am not ready to leave it yet." So she stayed, and in staying, she found a bittersweet peace. She tended Fletcher's grave weekly, bringing flowers and talking to him as if he could hear. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, making sure they knew the kind of man he had been. And every day, in the quiet morning hours, Sarah would find the love notes Fletcher had left over the years, tucked into books and drawers and corners of the house. She had saved every single one, hundreds of tiny papers covered with his handwriting, each one a small proof of his love. "You are beautiful. Thank you for being mine. I love you more today than yesterday." Every single day, she would read them and remember and feel grateful beyond measure for the life they had shared. Sarah lived for another 8 years after Fletcher's death, years filled with the love of family and the comfort of memories. She remained sharp and engaged, teaching her great-grandchildren to read, offering advice when asked, and always telling the story of how Fletcher had proved her mother wrong. "Never let anyone tell you that you are unlovable," she would say to her granddaughters and great-granddaughters. "Your worth is not determined by how you look or what others think. It is inherent, unchangeable, absolute. And when the right person comes along, someone who sees that truth and celebrates it, hold on to them. Build a life with them. Choose them every single day, just as they choose you." In the spring of 1940, 63 years after she had arrived in San Jose, Sarah died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 85. She was buried beside Fletcher, their graves side by side under the oak trees they had loved, with a single headstone that read, "Fletcher and Sarah Turner." Beloved husband and wife, proved that love is a choice made every single day. At her funeral, their 3 children spoke of their parents' legacy, not just the ranch or the material wealth they had accumulated, but the example of faithful, enduring love they had provided. Freddie's son, now a teacher himself, talked about how his grandfather had left love notes for his grandmother for 55 years, never missing a single day. Grace's daughter spoke of watching her grandparents hold hands into their 80s, still choosing each other, still finding joy in each other's company. But it was Henry, the son who had taken over the ranch and carried on his father's work, who perhaps summed it up best. "My father once told me that loving my mother was the easiest thing he had ever done," Henry said, his voice carrying across the crowded church. "He said it was as necessary as breathing, as simple as sunrise, and he proved it every single day through actions big and small." He left her notes. He brought her flowers, he listened when she spoke. He supported her dreams, he honored her intelligence, he cherished her presence. He never took her for granted, never assumed his work was done, never stopped courting the woman he had married. Henry paused, looking out at the gathering of family and friends. "My mother believed she was unlovable because someone she trusted told her so. My father spent 55 years proving that belief wrong. And in doing so, he taught all of us what real love looks like. Not the fairy tale version that ends with a wedding, but the real version that shows up every day, that chooses patience and kindness, that persists through challenges, that deepens rather than fades with time." He looked at his own wife, his children, his grandchildren. "They left us a legacy far more valuable than land or money. They left us an example of how to love well, how to choose each other daily, how to build something lasting from commitment and care. That is what we must carry forward. That is how we honor their memory." The ranch that Fletcher and Sarah had built together remained in the Turner family for generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation that had been laid. Fletcher's love notes, carefully preserved by Sarah, became family heirlooms, passed down with instructions to read them and remember that love is not just spoken but demonstrated, not just felt but shown. And in the valley where they had lived and loved and built their life together, the story of Fletcher and Sarah Turner became a legend of sorts. Parents told it to their children as an example of true love. Young couples cited them as their relationship goals. Elderly pairs pointed to them as proof that lasting love was possible. Because in the end, that was what Fletcher and Sarah had proven, that love is not about perfection or fairy tale romance. It is about showing up. It is about choosing your person every single day, through the exciting moments and the mundane ones, through the easy times and the hard ones, through youth and middle age and old age. It is about proving, through consistent action and unwavering commitment, that the person you love is worthy of that love. Fletcher had promised Sarah that he would prove her mother wrong every single day, and he had kept that promise for 55 years, until death parted them. But even death had not ended the proof, because the legacy of their love lived on in their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and in everyone who heard their story and believed that maybe, just maybe, that kind of love was possible for them too. Sarah had arrived in San Jose in 1877 believing she was unlovable, that her scarred face had sentenced her to a life alone. She died in 1940 knowing beyond any doubt that she had been deeply, thoroughly, completely loved. That transformation from self-doubt to certainty, from fear to faith, from isolation to belonging was Fletcher's true gift to her. Not just his love, but her ability to finally, fully believe she was worthy of it. And so their story ended not with tragedy or loss, but with triumph. The triumph of love over fear, of truth over lies, of daily choice over momentary feeling. The triumph of two people who found each other against odds, who built something lasting from hope and hard work, who proved that love, real love, is the most powerful force in the world when it is given freely, received gratefully, and honored faithfully. Every single day.